Hey, what is up, everybody? My name is Riley. Code morning to you. And as you can see, this is my first video on this channel, so thank you for jumping in here with me. As you can see over here, we're going to be building out this card kind of layout effect right here. You can see we have individual cards, each with its own drop shadow, and obviously just some very basic title and description text. Now, I have uploaded a very similar video to this on my other channel. However, some things have changed in Swift. I've noticed some better practices, so I thought I'd redo this and upload this on this channel, which is going to be solely dedicated to coding tutorials. So as you can see, we have the cards over here. This is what we're going to be building out, and we're going to be doing this using a table view rather than a collection view as in the previous video. A table view is just a little bit better because if for whatever reason you're on a different phone and the phone gets larger or smaller, a table view will actually scale with the phone, whereas a collection view, whatever size you set for this cell or this card, is going to be the same. It's not going to scale with the phone. So table views are just a little bit easier to use. You can definitely still use a collection view, but I'm going to be using a table view. The rest is totally up to you. And as you can see over here, we have some assets that we're going to be using. That's just the basic pictures that we have right here. And yeah. So next, you may already know some of this. You already may know how to set up a table view. If so, that is great. I don't want to bore you. And I'm just going to throw up something right now, just kind of like a table of contents for the video. If you want to skip ahead, you're more than welcome to do so, just to the parts that you actually need help with. And just to kind of give you an overall guide of where the video is heading. So you can look at that right now, skip ahead if you want. Otherwise, let's just jump into it right now. So I've already created the project right here. It's just a single view application. Just go to File, New Project, and you can create it. Call it whatever you want, put it wherever you want. I have done absolutely nothing else. So here we are. You can see we have our view controller right here that it creates for us, and we have our main.storyboard, which it also creates for us. So the first thing we're going to be doing is setting up this storyboard, but I actually want to just clear out some of this fluff for you. I don't want to confuse anybody, so I'm going to bring this app delegate and the launch screen.storyboard, and I'm going to move it into this group right here, just so nobody has to see it. And then I'm going to drag this info.plist file above it, and let's name this etc. There we go. And I apologize if you can hear me typing. I plan to do something about that eventually, but unfortunately that has not been done yet. Okay, so let's go into the storyboard here, and we're going to start setting up our table view. So you can go over here to this outlets right here, and let's just type table view, and you can see right here we have table view. Make sure you do not choose table view controller. That will create an entirely new controller right here. We just want the table view, which we can drag within this controller that's already been created for us. Now let's set out some constraints for this, and we're just going to do 0 all the way around. So what we're doing right now is we're just saying basically the table view is going to take up the entire width of this view controller. So there's going to be 0 pixels in between the top and bottom, the left and right, as compared to the view controller. And so this is looking pretty good right here. So let's go over to the attributes inspector on this table view. And you can see we have prototype cell 0 right now. Let's just boost this up to 1. And now you can see we have a cell right here. And this is exactly what we want. So then let's go over to the size inspector on this table view. Let's turn off the automatic row height. And let's do 250. And that's looking pretty good right there. So now our cell size is going to be 250. Actually, let's make it 275. Let's give ourselves some room. So now we have a table view, and we know the cells are going to be of size 275 pixels. So now let's actually set up this individual cell. So the first and key aspect that we're going to be laying out is a view. So let's go back over to the outlets. Let's type UIView and view right here, and we're going to drag this in. And then let's set some constraints on this as well. Let's do 15 pixels all around the side. So it's going to be 15 pixels in between the edge of the cell and this view. Let's click enter. Okay, and we're going to make it a different color just so we can see it. So this view right here that we just laid out, this is actually going to be the card itself. So what we're doing basically is we're placing a view right here, and then we can actually add, because let's say we have multiple prototype cells, each with their own view right here. It's going to look like it has spacing in between each cell, and that's exactly what we want for the card layout. So then when we add the drop shadow, the rounded corners, etc., it's going to be on this view right here. Whereas on a collection view, you might do it on the cell itself. That's also a perfectly fine approach, but that's not what we're doing right now. So now we have this view, and this is going to be our card. So let's actually add the other elements we're going to need. If you remember, we have an image, a title, and a description. So let's go back over here, and let's type UI image, and we're going to drag in this image view. So let's do this. Let's resize it ever so slightly, maybe 100 pixels tall. And let's set some constraints for this too. So it's going to be 0 pixels from the top, 0 from the left, 0 from the right. And it's just going to fill all this empty space we have right here. And then we're going to set the height to be 100 constant. And that's looking pretty good right there. Alright, so let's drag in the title. So this is going to be done using a UI label. So let's type label, and let's drag this in. And let's move that right there. And let's give it a little bit of a bolding effect. So let's do semi-bold just for now. And I think 17 size is pretty good. Now let's add some constraints as well. We're going to do 8 pixels on the left and the top and the right. And then let's just do the height to be a constant 25, just to give ourselves some breathing room. Alright, that's looking pretty good. And then one more label for the description. And then let's also set some constraints here. Let's do 8, 8, 8, and then 8 from the bottom. So it'll just fill up all this empty space right here. Now that's looking pretty great. Alright, let's continue on. So now I think what we should be doing is setting this up so that this controller right here interacts with this view controller. And we already know it's interacting with it in some regards, because if we go over to the identity inspector on this view controller, you can see that the class is set to view controller. That's what this file is right here. So I'm going to hold the option key on the keyboard, and I'm going to click the view controller.swift file. And what this does is it opens up in this this bifold kind of a menu. You can also do that by clicking this little Venn diagram. It's called the assistant editor. And I'm just going to hide that. Alright, now we're looking pretty good. So the first thing, we want to set something called the delegate and the data source for this table view. So I'm going to hold the control button on the keyboard, and I'm going to drag from this table view up to this little yellow and white marker at the top here. And I'm going to click data source, and I'm going to do control drag one more time, and I'm going to do delegate. So what this is doing is it's basically telling the table view that this view controller right here is going to do any delegate functions, and it's also going to support the data for this table view. So basically we're just saying this view controller is going to manage everything to do with this table view. And then over here in the file, we're going to drag ourselves an outlet for this table view so that we can modify it whenever we want by doing the same thing, basically control drag, and let's go right here. And we're going to name this card table view. So now we have an outlet to this table view. And if we wanted, we could do something like card table view dot is hidden. And we could set that to true, and then you wouldn't see this table view anymore. So that's what we just allowed ourselves to do. So let's continue on now. So we've already established that this table view is going to be managed by this view controller. Now let's go into our code and actually give ourselves the ability to do different functions on that table view. So we're going to do UITableView delegate, and then UITableView data source. And it's going to complain at us right here. And what this is going to say is it does not conform to protocol UITableView data source. Do you want to add protocol stubs? I'm just going to type it in myself. This is saying that there are some necessary functions that we have to follow whenever we say that we're going to follow UITableView delegate and UITableView data source. And what these are is number of rows. So as you can see, I just started typing number of rows. It'll autofill to this function right here. And actually, I'm going to just open up this single file, makes things a little bit easier. So it autofilled this function right here. This is a pre-built function from Swift for a table view, basically saying, okay, how many rows do you want in this table view? And we'll be setting that in a little bit, but for right now, let's just return 0. And then we have one more function that we need to follow. And we can just start typing cell for row at. And this right here is basically saying, how do we want to set up these cells in that table view? What are those cells going to be managed by? And we'll be getting more into that here in a little bit. So first, I'm just going to get rid of this error. I'm going to say return UITableView cell, and I'm going to create a new one by instantiating it with this little marker right here, and then that should stop all our errors. So now I want to set up our actual data. Our data being these images right here, the titles for them, the descriptions, etc. So let's go below our outlets, and let's say let pictures equal, and then let's just create an empty array, and let's specify what kind of array it's going to be. You don't have to do this, but it's going to be an array of UI images. And then we're also going to have an array of titles. This is going to be an array of strings. And let's make that an empty array. And then we're also going to have an array of descriptions. Also an array of strings. Alright, now we're looking pretty good. So let's actually add these pictures to our project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into assets.xc assets, and this is where you manage all pictures in Swift. And I closed out of what I was doing here. That was not very smart of me. So let's go back to assets. Okay, so here's the folder with all our assets. Now I'm just going to click one, hold shift, click on the bottom one to select all of them, and I'm just going to drag these in right here. So now we have all these images at our disposal to use within our code however we want. So let's go back over to our viewController.swift, and in this array for pictures, we're going to start defining all our UI images. So let's do UI image, and then do open parentheses, and we're just going to find what we need here, and it's going to be named. So basically we're saying we're going to create a UI image. It's going to be named based off of an image that we've already dragged in. And if you remember, we had beach.jpg. That's this right here. We also have desert and mountain, so let's do that now. I'm going to copy and paste this so it's a little bit quicker. And it looks like I messed that up, so let's add this U. Alright, we had mountain, and we also had desert. So now we have an array of all of our images. And it's saying that it could be optional because we don't know if this actually exists right now. We, in fact, do know. It's just the compiler does not know. So we're going to add this exclamation mark. What this is saying is that we know for a fact that this exists. It's not going to be optional. It's not going to be nil. So yeah. So now let's add our titles. So our first title is going to be corresponding to the beach. So we're going to say beach paradise. And then our second one's corresponding to the mountain. So we're going to say mountain resort. And then last but not least, we have our desert. Let's just do desert wasteland. Honestly, that's what it is. And then for our descriptions, I'm just going to come up with something very quickly. A beautiful beach paradise for the entire family. Looking pretty good. For the mountains, let's do stunning mountain view in the Rockies. Sure. And then last but not least, a desolate wasteland of nothing but sand. Alright, so now we have an array of pictures, titles, and descriptions ready for our disposal. So let's go back over here, let's revisit this. For the number of rows and sections, remember this is asking, let me write it out for you. How many rows in the table view? Now we want however many rows, we want however many elements are in here. So as you can see, there's 3. Now we could just do return 3 because we have 3 items, but that's not very good practice. What if we wanted to add another one? Well, how about we just do pictures.count. Now you could do titles.count, descriptions.count, but because these are all going to have the same number of elements, it really doesn't matter which one you choose. I'm just choosing pictures because why not? So now we have established our table view. Let's just run it and see what happens. So as you can see here, nothing happens. So you can see that we have 3 elements in our table view, but nothing is showing up. And that's because of this right here, the cell for row out. Or sorry, cell for row at. And remember, this right here defines what cells are being used. And as you can see, we return just basically a blank UITableView cell. And that's why everything is blank right now. So let's actually go in and let's define this cell now. So the first thing, let's right click on this folder right here. You can also go to File, New if you want. I think it's quicker just to right click here. And let's do New File. It's going to be of Cocoa Touch class. And this is going to be a UITableView cell. So we're defining our own cell class here. And let's just call this card cell. Let's click Next. And let's click Create. So we're just going to get rid of all of this because I don't want it. Alright, so now we have an empty cell here. Let's actually establish that this cell right here is going to be dictated by this file that we just created. Oops. So if we actually click on the cell, which you can also do with this side menu right here, see this table view cell, click on that, go over to the identity inspector, and under class, click the drop down menu, and you can see this is the cell class that we just created here. So click card cell. So now this cell right here in the table view is going to be dictated by the card cell class that we created. So what this allows us to do is we can drag in outlets and modify the elements here in the code of the class that we just created. So now once again, hold the Option key on your keyboard and click cardcell.swift. And I'm going to hide this side menu using this button down here. So now let's actually define all of these outlets. And let's start with the base view. So I click the view. You can verify with the side menu right here, view. Let's hold Control and drag here. So let's call this card view. So now we have an outlet to this view right here, and that will allow us to add the drop shadow and the rounded corners that we want to do in a little bit. Let's click on this image view, hold Control, drag. Let's do picture view. Let's do connect. Let's click on this title. We'll do title label. And then let's click on the description. And let's do description label. And let me spell that right. Okay. All right, so now we have outlets to all these items, but how do we actually set what these items are going to be? Well, I'm going to do things what I think is the best way of doing this, and I'm going to define a function within this cell class, and let's just call it configure. And what this function is going to do is it's going to set up the cell. And what I mean by that is it's going to set what picture should show, what title should show, and what description should show. And the arguments for this is going to be called within this right here, the cell for row app. And you'll see that in a little bit. But for right now, let's just do a single file, go over to your card cell class, and the arguments for this are going to be picture, and this is going to be of UI image. We're going to do title, this is going to be a type string, and then we're going to do description, and this is going to be of type string as well. And then whenever we call this function, we want to set whatever was passed in to be on these elements. So let's start with the picture. So let's do picture view dot image equals picture. Okay. So now this image, the picture view right here, will be set to whatever image we pass in here. Let's do title label dot text equals title. So now the title label will be set to whatever title's passed in. And similarly, the description label will be whatever we pass in. So that's looking pretty good. Now we've basically done most everything that we need to be doing in the card cell, but we will be revisiting that in a little bit, just not quite yet. Okay, so let's go back over to the view controller. Let's go to the cell for row at, and let's finish this out right here. So like I said, this is going to define what cells are being used and how they're being used. So the first thing we're going to be doing, it's a little confusing, but stick with me, is we're going to do let cell equal tableview dot DQ reusable cell. You can let it complete for you with identifier, and we're going to do card cell for index path. And what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in this index path that we got from the function. So I'm just going to type in index path. And we're going to cast this as a type that we defined here. So we're going to do as card cell. So basically, we're grabbing a cell from the storyboard that is this kind so that we can modify it. And this identifier right here we have not set yet. So let's go over to our main.storyboard, and we're going to click on the card cell and reuse identifier right here. This is going to be card cell. So whenever we call this tableview.dq reusable cell with identifier card cell, it's going to go over here and it's going to look for a cell with this identifier. And because we set that, we're good. And then when we go and we say as card cell, it's going to look for a cell within the table view with this identifier that is also of class card cell. And as you can see, we have both those right now, so we should be good. And then rather than returning this blank UITableView cell, we're going to return the cell that we just grabbed here. Okay, so now what we want to do, okay, well this could technically be an optional. I'm just going to say we know for a fact that a cell with this reuse identifier and this class exists. So changing that question mark to an exclamation mark is basically telling the code, I know for a fact this exists, it will never be nil. So we should be good now. So now that we have an instance of this cell, we can call functions on it. And the function that we want to call is that function that we defined here, the configure. So let's go to the view controller and let's type cell.configure. And now we can set the picture, title, and description for each cell that goes by. So you can imagine this like a for loop. It's going to start from the 0 index all the way until pictures.count. And for each cell, it's going to define something that we're setting right now. So for the picture, we're going to go to our pictures array, and we're going to pass in something called the index path dot row. So if you imagine a for loop and you have a value I, and you're going from 0 to 4, so you're going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what this index path is, but it corresponds to the number of rows and sections. So if we have 3 rows, index path dot row is going to go 0, 1, 2. And that correlates perfectly with our arrays that we have here. So let's continue. For titles, let's go titles index path dot row. And for description, we're going to go descriptions index path dot row. Okay, I'll save that and let's run it and see what we have. Alright, now you can see we have a incredibly ugly card layout, but hey, it's here and it's something, right? So, oops. Let's keep modifying this a little bit. So let's pretty it up first. First thing we can do is we can change the constraints on the view right here that we have. I think this is going to be the best first step. So if you go over here to the size inspector for this view, you can actually change constraints without having to set them again. We had it at 15 before, but I think I'm going to do 10 on the left and the right, and you can see what it is because it highlights over on the storyboard. So let's do 10 on each side, and then at the top and bottom I'm going to do 5. And I'm going to do 5 because when you have a second cell, you have these 5 pixels on the bottom of this cell, and then you'll have the 5 pixels on the top of the next cell. So that will be 10 pixels in between each cell. So that should help there. Next thing we can do is we can set this background color to be something not so ugly. Let's do white. Now, you obviously will not be able to see the card right now, but we'll be setting that in a little bit. So here we go. This is what we have now. Let's make it a little bit prettier. Click on the table view, and you can change the, where is it? Separator separator right here. Change that to none. That will get rid of these little lines right here that we don't really need in between each card. Okay, now let's run that, see what we have. And it's looking a lot better, although, like I said, you cannot see the card. So let's change that. So let's go over to this cardcell.swift file. And in this configure function that we already have, this is where we're going to set the drop shadow on this card view. It's where we're going to round the corners, etc., etc. So it's a lot to remember. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I have the code already laid out. I'm going to copy this and paste it right here. And I called it card background when I did originally, but this is actually card view. And I'll explain what each of these are. Okay, so card view.layer.shadow color. This is going to set the color of the drop shadow that we're about to create. Shadow offset is going to be the offset of the shadow. So if you imagine the shadow is in the center of the cell, so the shadow will be equal parts on the top, left, right, and bottom. The offset will set it over to the right some and down some. We did that each by 1 pixel. And then on the shadow opacity, we're setting how much can you see that shadow. Mask to bounds is a little more complicated. It's basically saying, does it get, in a way, clipped off by the cell? We're just going to say no. And then the quarter radius is for the view itself, you know, the radius of the corner around there. So this right here is what is going to give us that card effect on that UI view. So if we run the file now, we can actually see what this looks like. And as you can see, it's looking significantly better now. It is not in any ways perfect. It seems like we need to modify the constraints some still, but you can see we have the cards now. So the card was really just achieved by having a UI view and then placing a drop shadow on it, and now you have a card. So let's pretty it up a little bit more. It's still kind of ugly. I'm going to change the constraints on the title, and let's see. Yeah, let's do 10 on these. So on the top, left, and right. I guess in bottom too. Okay, that gives us some more space. Same thing here. Let's change all the 8s to 10 just to give us a little bit more breathing room. And then on the view itself, let's change the constraints to be 5 on the left and the right. So this is the left side. Let's change that to 5. And let's do 5 there. And I think that will look at least a little bit better. So another thing that you may or may not have noticed is that our text gets cut off here. And we don't want that. That's not very professional. It does not look very good. So let's stop that from happening. So this is the description that's getting cut off. So let's tap the description right here. Let's go over to the attributes inspector. And you can see lines. Lines right now is just 1. That's why it's being cut off. Now you could just kind of guess what it's going to be at. You can set this to 300 lines if you want, just to be on the safe side. But an easy thing to do is if you just want to detect how much space it should take and wrap the text automatically, just change lines to be 0. And it will automatically wrap that text for you. So let's build that. And as you can see, the text is now wrapped. Our constraints are looking a lot better. And everything's looking pretty solid. So there you go, guys. That's all that it took to create a card layout. I hope you learned something from this. Hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit like or leave a comment. If you didn't like it, just let me know why. Hit the dislike button if you want. That's okay. But please leave a comment and tell me how I can improve in my next videos. This was my first video on this channel, so hopefully I can do better in the future. Just let me know how I can, and I will try to accommodate that for you. So, thank you very much. I hope to see you next time. Peace.